it's time for a special Directors Roundtable talk. We have invited a couple special guests into the studio. I'd like to introduce Julius Ziz, Pip Chodorov, and Sebartian Mekas, who has joined us to talk about their role at the Busan International Short Film Festival and just really get into filmmaking in general. It's great to have you guys here in the studio.
Thanks.
Happy to be here.
You know, I was really impressed. On Wednesday, you guys were all there for the opening ceremony. A couple of you got up, a couple of you read poetry and did some performances. But I really wanted to know, first of all, what was kind of the idea behind that performance, Julius? You were reading poetry in Lithuanian.
Well, what was Jonas Poetry, what I read, the whole idea was for Julius to play drums, and we had the grand trumpetist, and then we just read Jonas Poetry from one of his books. It's called Žodžiai and Raidės, Words and Letters.
I think that it's going to, come up a lot, the poetry aspect of this throughout our talk today. But I'm curious, before we jump into some of, the obvious amount of work that we have to get into to talk about films, I just want to know your first impressions of Busan. Have you been here, any of you, before?
First time in Korea, first time in Busan. Wonderful. So we had these few days, really wonderful people, wonderful food, wonderful festival, a wonderful director of the festival, so far.
Okay. What about you, Sebartian?
Yeah, first time in Busan, second time in Korea. No, it's been great here. We've just been beginning to explore this large city, but we've been very moved by the hospitality and the festival and the people we've met.
Have you been able to try any of the food? I keep hearing people see you around town trying local delicacies.
Yes, the food is really wonderful. It's a great experience.
Now, as we get into it, I wanted to just start off with the tale of how all of you found your way to Korea in various aspects, particularly the inspiration behind having the Busan International Short Film Festival host this, you can call it a retrospective of Jonas Mekas' work and Lithuanian films in general. How did all of you kind of come onto this project?
Well, maybe Pip.
Yeah, this is Pip. It's actually my idea. A few years ago, 2 years ago to be exact, we were sitting around with the programmers, because I'm one of the programmers. My specialty is experimental cinema, and I said to the other guys, hey, in 2 years it's going to be Jonas Mekas Centennial. We're going to do programs all around the world, and I'd really love to do something here. So why don't we make Lithuania the next guest country and do a program for Jonas in the experimental section? And actually, they're opening the Lithuanian embassy in October of 21, so April of 22, there'll be a new ambassador. And it all just worked out perfectly like clockwork, and no one knows that it's my idea. It just says the Busan Festival decided.
Well, it is your brainchild, but also, how do you know each other? Have you ever met before?
Oh, we're old friends.
Very, very old friends.
Yeah.
You're all from the same neighborhood? Or, you were living in the same city at some point, right?
We're New Yorkers.
Yeah, all New Yorkers. Yeah, and I'm curious, just which area, if you don't mind me asking. Are you Manhattan, Brooklyn? Which area did you guys reside in?
We are in Brooklyn with Sebartian. We're from Brooklyn.
I'd say we started in Manhattan and segued to Brooklyn. But, Sebartian and I went to a high school in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan. I was there a few years earlier in a different building, but same school, and we all met in the lower East Village, where Jonas Mekas had founded the anthology Film Archives, where Julius was one of the main people working there at the time that I started getting active in the early 90s.
Okay. And of course, this year the festival has opened up with a special section dedicated to the films of Jonas Mekas, and they're showcasing a broad swatch of films. But I'm curious, how did you decide which ones that you were going to show? There's such a, breadth of body. And also, do you have any favorites? Is it even possible to have a favorite?
Well, you could say Jonas's work is like one giant film, and it's all parts of the same project. Some with some exceptions. Since I'm the programmer, I guess I'm the best to why I chose the films I chose. First of all, The first thing I did was to ask Julius to suggest a series of films by other filmmakers that would represent well kind of other experimental filmmaking from Lithuania. And he can explain a little about that selection. But then I chose the second program, Prism 2, to be short films of Jonas because it's a short film festival. And I chose the ones that were either most representative of different styles of his work or the ones we happen to have restored recently because we're showing remastered digital files of 16mm films. And then I said to the programmers, you know, the Lithuanian Cultural Institute, who's supporting us, has recently helped to pay for a new 4K digital restoration of Jonas's masterpiece, which is a 5-hour-long movie called As I Was Moving Ahead, Occasionally I Saw Brief Glimpses of Beauty. And I said, why not show in a short film festival a really long film? It's kind of made up of pieces. It's like short pieces, and you could think of it as a selection of short films as well.
Yeah, it does fit together. I believe there's 12 sections in that.
There's 12 what we call chapters or reels, 16mm reels. It's structured that way, but in fact, within each reel, there's already rolls, like 2.5-minute rolls. So there's a lot of little parts, and it all fits together like a series of glimpses, like the title suggests.
And, you know, we started off the festival, and the opening film was Quartet Number 1, which I guess had Sebartian, yourself, in there. I'm really curious, you know, growing up, were you in front of the camera a lot, or were you behind the camera a lot? Were you using it? I have so many questions about what it must have been like to just be part of all this film.
Yeah, well, I grew up in front of the camera, so it wasn't much of something I was thinking about. And there's something also very unique to my father's style of making films, that he sometimes called himself not a filmmaker but a filmer. He would insist that he would emphasize the action of filming, and the completion of the film might come decades later. So you weren't so conscious of it's not something they would just go on to YouTube, you know, the next day or be made into a film the next year necessarily. So I think that's why people were very natural, including myself.
Well, you know, I do have a question, I guess, for all of you. In regards to this, you know, I guess he said his style was also like he's a filmer or he's making diary films. But what differences do you think do you see that he was doing between those 40 years with the 16mm camera and what most of us do today with our phones? Is there a big difference? Do you see some intention that separates, you know, that idea of using a 16mm to document life versus just we do that every day now naturally? So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a big difference. Why a big difference? We were talking last night about Jonas filmmaking with 16mm with the Bolex, and he said himself it took him like 10 years when he really got his style, you know, because at the end when he wasn't looking to the lens, he was doing with his fingers. Actually, he felt the moment. So it's a little bit different what you do now. You take pictures, you look and stuff. It was completely different. Jonas' style completely different.
Yeah, this is Pip. I think the difference is also because nowadays people are used to taking selfies. I think this is a modern, recent phenomena. I always use a camera to capture what's in front of me, what I see. But now people capture themselves. They turn the camera on themselves, which with the 16mm camera is a little bit tricky to do. And when I show Jonas's films to my students, sometimes they say, "Oh, he was the grandfather of the vlog."
Yeah.
But I think it's very, very different because when I see people on YouTube eating a hamburger and filming it, you know, it's just not that interesting, and it doesn't seem to have the same function of preserving a moment that's important somehow for yourself to capture for yourself the memory of this moment or these people or the celebration of life. It seems more like a broadcasting thing. Someone wants to have their own channel or get followers or somehow they're using the technology in a very different way.
You know, I'm curious that I think it was in one of the interviews with Jonas, he's talked about all the lost footage of so many people filming things that are never going to get seen. Back when people were using film, obviously 16mm, even I'm assuming VHS, a lot of this has to do with the analog technology. Did Jonas ever use digital to shoot? Did he try it? Or, I mean, I've seen some of, he has those 5 cameras and tons of film. Did he ever get into digital at all?
Absolutely. When he had his first video camera, which was an analog camera back, I think that was around 1988, and he immediately got excited about the possibilities of, first of all, the sync sound, the long takes that were possible, things that were also just not affordable with 16 millimeter or Super 8, and that was the beginning of for the last 30 years he was mostly with digital. Even just a few years before he died, he got a small little camera that fit in the pocket, practically even smaller than a phone, and he used it very differently from the Bolex, from the 16 millimeter, and he made it's very appropriate for this festival because he made a lot of short video pieces. Back in 2007, he made one for every day of the year, what he called the 365-day project, and this was the same year that YouTube really became popular, that the iPhone came out, really. So he was very much with the times and changing technologies.
At the same time, he did still shoot with 16 millimeter.
I can answer this. He actually, after 5 decades of using the 16 millimeter camera, he started to feel that he was repeating himself, and his style. I mean, he reached a point where he was making the same film over and over, and he wanted something new. I think the video camera gave him a totally new approach to make different kind of work, and he used it like he would record sound. Whereas with the 16 millimeter camera, he took bursts and flashes and frame by frame and double exposures and things and slow motion and fast motion. With the video camera, he took long, slow takes and captured, whole dinners and it's a very different approach. And I think he was able that way to challenge himself to find a new way to do something new for himself. And I must say, of all the filmmakers I know, he was maybe the one who most adopted the new technologies. As soon as YouTube was there, he right away started making work. I mean, a lot of other filmmakers would really respect the old technology and say, I do it my way, but he was very open-minded and totally, it was amazing to see him use email and YouTube as soon as they were available.
I think that is something to be said about someone able to adapt that well. And, on that idea of kind of shorter takes and longer takes, I'm actually curious to kind of ask a question about not only his style, but you're all filmmakers in some regard. I just wanted to know what you thought about the value of time. This is a short film festival, and I just wanted to know, what is the value of time in a short film, say, versus a feature? All of you have made shorts. Some of you have made features. Is there a difference in the expectation that time plays? Either it's because, I know I'm going to make something under 30 minutes, so you have less time, there's more constraints, or is it, something else that is kind of transcending not only the actual real time, but in the film, do you want to, play with that idea more? The question is, what role does time have in the films that you make? Julius, you've made short films, you've put together a lot of different footage. How did you decide on, keeping it a short film, not running it 3 or 6 hours?
I don't know. Just it happens. You really don't look at the watch when you're making films. I don't know.
Yeah, Stan Brakhage actually answered this question once. He said that a film is like you start making a film, and it's like you start making a symphony. So if you put down something like da 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 dum, then you have to somehow find the next part, which must be something like da 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 dum, and it starts playing out in a kind of arrangement that creates a structure and eventually finds its culmination, and it takes the time it takes, and it doesn't matter how long it is. There's no really politics of duration. Some films are 3 minutes and they're too long, and some are 3 hours and they're too short.
I was just really thinking about particularly that question because the film that you mentioned, as I was moving ahead, occasionally I saw brief glimpses of beauty. It is a very long film, but also at the same time short glimpses, brief glimpses, as it says in the title. And so that's kind of what brought it to mind, because it is being played at a short film festival, but there's something there to just sit in that moment. And I know that Jonas had, he has very short films in the festival, some under 6 minutes, and then this film. So it seems like it plays an important part. Now, before we move on, though, to getting into more of the avant-garde and Lithuanian films, I do want to take a song break. Let's listen to one from the film by the Cordettes. Welcome back to Cine Concerto. We are having a special Directors Roundtable talk for the Busan International Short Film Festival. It's the 39th iteration of this, and Lithuania is the guest of honor. We have with us Julius, who is a amazing Lithuanian filmmaker, as well as an amazing poet, I would have to say, reading some poetry and also looking at some of the work. Also, Pip Chodorov is here, as well as Sebartian Mekas. All of them are joining us as we talk about not only the film festival in general, but also Jonas Mekas, Sebastian's father, and his work, which is being showcased right now. Well, as we jump in, I wanted to really talk about the Lithuanian filmmakers. There's so much showcasing of new and old films. I'm curious, how did you get any recommendations? How did you choose these? And do you have any recommendations for our listeners, maybe some people you want to talk about?
Well, as Pip said, he asked me to put the program of short Lithuanian, but more like, I would say, like experimental films. And I chose, and I think, pretty good program. It's I really recommend. It's tomorrow, right?
Yeah,
it's tomorrow, and one of the top films I want to mention, it's called Black Box by Algimantas Maceina. He filmed still Lithuania was part of Soviet Union, but was during last years of perestroika, when Lithuanians were allowed to go back to Siberia and pick up the bones of relatives who died in concentration camps. And he did pick up his grandfather. So it's all trip with his father going to pick up what's left from his grandfather's body, and it's very. And then we have several other films, but I would say that will be kind of very, very strong documentary experimental film.
I'm curious about the experimental film world. It's constantly fighting against the gentrification of film, which has come up a lot. Do you think that it's this new recent wave of Lithuanian filmmakers are helping to deepen the culture of cinema within Lithuania?
I cannot answer this question. Why? Because I live in New York, and unfortunately, I don't know what's really happening at the moment with young Lithuanian filmmakers. So I'm sorry.
There are some Lithuanian films and filmmakers here in Busan. That were programmed by actually Rimante, who's working with the Lithuanian Short Film Council, and she's here. She's on the jury as well, and she and the other Korean programmers chose a selection of fiction films, short Lithuanian films that are by new filmmakers. It's a different section of the program from ours, which is the Prism section.
Now, as we talk about our films, you are a director as well. You have a film here. Can you talk about your work that people can see, Julius?
Well, it's a part of that series. The film it's called "And Pig Was Born." Actually, the film, going back to Jonas, actually, thanks to him, the film happened because we were invited to a big exhibition, Voila, in Paris. It was for 2000-year celebration. And the film I made as outtakes from Anthology Film Archive, all different student films and stuff. So I put all together as a film.
And also, I'm mentioning the Anthology Film Archive. We didn't get. I don't know if many people realize this. We are featuring Jonas Mekas as a filmmaker, but he also did so many other things. I think it's worth talking about the other. So many different focuses that he had. So I don't know if anyone wanted to comment on that. I think it's really impactful for our listeners.
Yes, it's he always. had a laugh about it. That I mean, in every country, he's known as for something different. In his native Lithuania, foremost as a poet, which he began writing, publishing already back in 1948. Here, well, in New York, though, perhaps he's more recognized for his film criticism as a weekly columnist for the Village Voice for over a decade. And also for his role as creating institutions and creating alternative ways of film distribution, of screening cinema, preservation. These are the what makes up the mission of Anthology Film Archives in New York.
I don't know if you had anything to add, Pip?
Jonas always said everything he did by necessity. When there was no place to show a film in New York because you had to be distributed by a big company, he said, let's start our own company, and he did. And same thing for programming. There's no place to see these films because theaters won't take them, so we rent our own theater. And then preservation was the same. Same with the film criticism. No one was writing about these little poem films. But stepping back and looking at his career, what I thought recently was interesting is that he actually inserted himself into every step of the chain. That is, he helped people get their films produced, and then he helped people get their films shown, and then distributed, and then he wrote about them in the paper, and then he preserved them for posterity. He did everything.
He did do it all. All right, well, thank you so much. And all of you, I hope that you have the best of luck at this festival and also with safe travels in the future. Hopefully, I'll see you around soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.